Blue defeated Maize by a score of 20-12 yesterday, and outside of some play by Cade McNamara and some of the lousy dropped passes at halftime when Colin Kaepernick was showing off his passing ability, everything was positive the Michigan spring game in my opinion, and today that's what we're going to be talking about. I intended on making this video about 24 hours ago and releasing it, but unfortunately I caught a case of the 12 to 24 hour flu. I'm still recovering from it, but yesterday I was bedridden. Today I am just sore and miserable. But all this requires is me just looking at an article, looking at some of my notes from the spring game yesterday, and just, sitting in a chair or futon and talking about it. This doesn't really require a lot of the physical activity that I really can't do right now. But anyway, enough with that tangent. Today is all Michigan football, talking about the spring game. I know that not everyone enjoyed the Colin Kaepernick halftime throw showing. I honestly could care less. I don't really have an opinion on that. But what I did like about it was the recruiting aspect. Whether you agree with Colin Kaepernick's political opinions or not, which I have no comment on, and for being a channel, that's the wisest thing to have in my opinion, but from a recruiting standpoint, having a former NFL QB who was developed by Harbaugh in the NFL, and having, a filmmaker whose name I forget for Colin Kaepernick's movie there, and having several NFL free agent wide receivers there, including Michigan's own Dalen Baldwin, who's going to try and get drafted in the NFL this coming May. It's totally a recruiting pitch. It's a total recruiting pitch, and I think that a lot of recruits would have enjoyed watching that at halftime. But anyway, that's just, a little side comment. We're mainly going to be talking about the spring game, and from this point onward, it's going to be exclusively spring game talk. So after this, about 2-minute introduction, let's get into the main things, the analysis part of the spring game. And I'm also going to be using an article, which I will link down below, by wolverineswire.com. So make sure to check that out. The first point that I want to talk about was Cade McNamara and the quarterback room. J.J. McCarthy was obviously not really playing. I saw him using my binoculars hold a snap for the backup kicker when kicking an extra point. But yeah, outside of that, he wasn't really active. It was Cade McNamara, it was Warren, and Alan Bowman. Those were the three QBs, and Alex Orji. How could we forget about him, the true freshman, who had some impressive runs. But anyway, it was those four, no more. Jaden Denegal did not see action either, but that's kind of expected. I didn't even expect to see Alex Orji on the field, but here we are. Anyway, to get to the point, Cade McNamara was, I don't want to throw insults out here, but watching his throws it did not make me comfortable. To a certain point, I want to say it was almost disgusting, but seeing what he did for us this past season, I'm going to give him some benefit of the doubt. But there is still quarterback controversy. Wolverines Wire writes, while J.J. McCarthy was unable to play on Saturday due to an injury he is nursing, the incumbent starting quarterback, Cade McNamara, had full reign, at least in, I'd say, the first third of the game. McNamara started for both teams, and he got to play several series for both teams, but he looked rather lethargic out there. The big issue last year with McNamara was the non-existent downfield throw, which I actually disagree with. The few times that he did throw downfield, some were overthrows, but I thought that McNamara was probably the best downfield throwing QB that Michigan has had in a while, and maybe that's because I've been watching football closer these past 2 to 3 years. I'm 19, by the way, so I've not had the full years of watching Michigan football that everyone else has had, but I felt that this is the case, that this past season Michigan did a really good job of throwing downfield the few times it did. Along with having explosive plays on the ground, Michigan consistently did have some big plays in the air. So I do disagree with this point from Wolverines Wire. But what I will agree with is in this spring game in particular, there was no downfield throw for him. He had an opportunity, and it was way off. I think it was one-on-one coverage or something. Wide receiver had a really good chance to catch it, but McNamara overthrew that one. And he went for 3 of 7 for 16 yards, which is, ouch. It's like the Washington game level passer rating. It's terrible. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when J.J. McCarthy comes back, is the final words from Wolverines Wire, and I agree. Earlier, when it was announced that McCarthy was nursing an injury, I thought that this would give Cade more time to improve, to solidify himself as the starter. I now completely disagree with that previous take after witnessing personally the spring game. I think that J.J. McCarthy, depending on the timeline of his recovery, he will come back and he will start, because Cade did not look impressive at all. And even though Michigan's schedule starts out easy, which would give room for mistakes to be made, I don't want to see, like this past season, where only 1 out of the first 5 games was a good to decent game for Cade, and the rest were not good at all. But Warren was impressive. Warren, and Wolverines Wire writes about this, but I'm going to give a little bit of my opinion first. He looked accurate. He had pocket awareness. He was poised. He stepped up when he needed to, and he eluded pressure, like the time where he ran up the middle of his O-line for a gain of 2. I'm impressed. I'm absolutely impressed. He's a walk-on, and Wolverines Wire writes that he's right on Alan Bowman's heels for the number 3 job. I think he's won it, and he looks pretty good. It's pretty clear who was the top 2 quarterbacks on the depth chart, but what about the third string? Writes Wolverines Wire. Alan Bowman, who transferred in last year from Texas Tech, was thought to have a chance to be the starting QB last year, but he saw very limited action. But walk-on Davis Warren arguably outplayed Bowman on Saturday. And Bowman did have a nice deep pass to Darius Clemens for a TD, a bite that pass was a tad bit overthrown, but still, it was a good play. Warren very much outplayed Bowman, and he went 12 for 23 and 175 yards. Bowman threw 2 TD passes, but Warren looked more poised in the pocket. He was more accurate, and I think Bowman did get sacked, and Warren didn't, and a lot of that was due to Warren's just pocket awareness and him being able to elude incoming edge rushers, defensive tackles, linebackers, him just being able to elude the front 7, whether they blitzed or not. Whenever they got pressure, he was able to elude them. He made a nice play, too, where it looked like it was going to be a busted play. I forget who he passed to, but he passed the ball, and it looked like it was into double coverage, and I think it might have gotten Michigan a first down. It was a really nice play. Pardon me for not remembering the wide receiver's name or the exact play, but it was a good play. He looked low-key good, and I know it was against, obviously, backups, guys who aren't going to be seen much in action, but nonetheless, he looked good for what he was facing, and I was impressed. And Alex Orji, just final thoughts. Bowman, I don't know. He doesn't look like a starting QB at the Power 5 level whatsoever, but he did make one nice play, and that was the downfield pass for a TD to Darius Clemens. Alex Orji, he does not have great passing ability, that's for sure, but he does have great running ability. I would not be surprised if he saw some action in like wildcat formations or for read options, kind of how we used McCarthy, but without the throwing piece to it. I would not be surprised by that at all. He faked out the whole stadium on a few read options. He can read defenses, and he's fast and can accelerate for sure. Michigan certainly has its deepest QB room since probably when Denard Robinson and Devin Gardner were in the same QB room. That's the quarterback situation. The running back room is versatile and full of skill. Blake Corum, he had, I think, 2 plays where he gained 20 yards or more, and that's pretty good. But outside of him, there was another. There appears to be a clear-cut favorite for the number 3 running back. And Donovan Edwards had a nice downfield reception that was a big play, so that was encouraging to see. But outside of the knowns, which are Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, they're going to be the number 1, number 2 punch. After the spring game, it appears that sophomore Tavierre Dunlap will be the man for the number 3 job, and he'll probably be seen a tad bit like how Edwards was in the running back rotation. Dunlap had 18 carries for 73 yards and 1 TD, and he had a nice nice few plays. Leon Franklin and Kalel Mullings are two that will also be in competition for that role. Mullings impressed me the most compared to Franklin, and Franklin also had a good game. I think he was a walk-on. I'm pretty sure that he was, but Mullings, a linebacker, did very well at the running back position. And Michigan's running back room, I would say it's, much deeper, much more skilled when it comes to that position than the QB room. I'd say Michigan's running back room is probably the deepest overall in the Big Ten. I would say, I wouldn't go as far to say that it has the best individual running back in the Big Ten. I think that goes to Trevion Henderson just because how he is in open space, whether it's him receiving the ball or whether it's his just speed in space, speed in general. Just Henderson's raw talent is phenomenal. He did not look like a freshman out there. He had some freshman moments, especially when it came to running the ball, but he was really good he was just good in every aspect, and I apologize for some slips. I'm still sick, but he was phenomenal. Henderson was, but I think Corum is going to have a really big year. I think Donovan Edwards is going to be really efficient. He'll probably be better than some wide receivers that Michigan has on the depth chart when it comes to receiving the ball. I cannot wait to see what Michigan's running back room is in general. I just, cannot. And speaking of wide receivers, speaking of them, in regards to Donovan Edwards being a good receiver, Ron Bellamy is definitely coaching up the wide receivers. That is for sure. You look at Darius Clemens and what he did. He looks like he can have instant impact, much like Andrel Anthony had some of it. But Anthony had some health issues this past season. So if Darius Clemens can stay healthy, he might be have a much greater impact than Anthony did. He was one of the three big-time freshmen at receiver that Michigan landed. Tyler Morris didn't play. Amorian Walker did, but the story was by far Clemens. He had 3 catches for 52 yards and 1 TD. And mind you, he had to put up mostly with Alan Bowman. He was on the blue team, so he caught passes from Alan Bowman, who was the least accurate outside of Orji when it came to the quarterback position. And so, yeah, imagine if he was receiving the ball from Cade or from Warren or from JJ, because having a good QB who makes your life easier at receiver is all the better. He adjusted for Bowman's slight overthrow on that long touchdown, which was amazing, and it will be intriguing, writes the Wolverines Wire. It'll be intriguing how the staff will get Clemens involved this year, but one thing is for certain, he belongs, and I agree. I think that Josh Gaddis, he hadn't really progressed our wide receivers to a big degree. So I think that having Ron Bellamy, who mainly worked with wide receivers for the majority of his career, will certainly help. I think that this spring game certainly showed that. There were some drops that were lousy, whether it was from running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, but mainly the former two. But again, some of those guys are 2 deep, 3 deep. I think the wide receiver room is certainly improving. Having Darius Clemens helps. Anthony, I think, had 1 reception for 5 yards is all I think he had. AJ Henning caught a substantial amount of passes, seeing that he didn't receive the ball a lot this past season. He was mainly used on returns and end arounds. But I'm excited for the wide receiver room, same that I am with really the entire offense. The entire offense returns so much. I feel like on the offensive side of the ball, in every aspect, there was a coaching upgrade. I think our biggest loss was Mike McDonald as defensive coordinator. So the defense is the bigger story to follow, but the first 3 points were about the offense. QB, there is concern when it comes to Cade McNamara, but running back, wide receiver looked good. The offensive line, they dominated. I'll just say that. The offensive line dominated, and a lot of those guys, obviously, because the same roster is scrimmaging, a lot of those guys were 2 deep guys too. Michigan's O-line and running back room, I'd say, are the deepest in their conference. They might be some of the deepest in the nation. The wide receiver room's improving. Tight end looked very good. I was impressed with the trick plays on offense too. I feel like, trick plays, Georgia, for example, when they beat us in the Orange Bowl, that one running back pass, trick plays that are executed successfully can be a blow to the opposing team's morale. They can get your team hyped. They confuse the defense entirely because they don't really know what to expect. I think trick plays they're important, and I love it when teams utilize them, and seeing Michigan go 2 for 2 on trick plays really got me excited. So that's the offense. It was about, a little over 10 minutes on the offense. We're now going to talk about the defense, which I have to be honest with you guys. The defense, it was a little harder for me to pay attention to, but overall, it looked good. It looked like they improved at defending the run. I know there were some big run plays, but you're facing, for example, Blake Corum. You have some two-deep guys. Defensive tackle, despite the fact that it looks better than you might have expected, it still has some work to be done. But I liked how the defensive ends looked. The linebackers looked good. But you can certainly tell that Michigan has lost a lot of experience on defense, though it isn't as bad as one might have anticipated. So the first point, Mike Sainristil and the secondary had a great showing. He had a good look of being a defensive back, and Wolverine's Wire says he's now a senior. He's been a full-time wide receiver until the season. Michigan has decided to move the speedster to defensive back, but he can be used both ways during the fall. In his first game action, he looked the part, staying up with his man and making plays. He had an amazing PBU where I think it was Cade threw into double coverage, and I did not like that pass. But the receiver totally could have caught it, and Sainristil was nice, keeping his hands on the receiver but not holding or grabbing. He kept up with his man and just deflected the ball away, which is, the perfect scenario of coverage. And it's good. I mean, if Michigan is not going to excessively work the transfer portal, why not make your guys all-purpose players? And that seems to be what Mike Sainristil is going to be. And I am really, really excited to see what he is going to do, honestly. And the rest of the secondary, too, they covered well. Some of those incomplete passes were due to drops that were due to perfectly timed hits, whether it was from the secondary or the other part of the defense. There were some pass deflections. Still, there were some just, poor plays all around when it came to QB decision-making. But nonetheless, the secondary certainly looked good. The next portion is the defensive line and linebackers haven't missed a beat. And this is to be put into perspective. It's not like, the pass rush is as good as when Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo were there. It's not like, it's like, we aren't missing Christopher Hinton or something like that. But they're both performing better than expected once again. And TJ Guy and Braden McGregor had good days on the edge. Michigan lost Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo to the NFL draft, obviously. But sophomore TJ Guy, junior Braden McGregor, both looked like they could help fill those voids. You also, I think you have, how could I forget? You have Mike Morris, and I think that he'll play a good part. There's one other player who, again, pardon me for, having a cloudy mind today, but he'll do well. And I think that overall the defensive line is in a pretty good position. I'd expect the run defense to improve, but the pass defense, mainly because of the pass rush, to take a step back. The defense overall should look pretty similar. I would expect a slight step back. It would be really impressive if the defense achieved the same efficiency on-field play as this past year, which was a very underrated defense in every way except the rush defense. Michigan's rush defense was certainly a paper tiger, and it was anything but great. The rush defense was. The Ohio State game, that was probably its best game when it came to rush defense, and most of that was just a lot of effective pass rush, and I felt like the guys overall were obsessed with Ohio State along with the staff. And that certainly helps when, there's a target on your rival's head. That certainly helps all around play. There looks to be plenty of depth at defensive tackle, since we're still on the defensive line portion. As mentioned above with the loss of Hutchinson and Ojabo, writes Wolverine's Wire, the Wolverines need some help with the interior defensive line with the loss of Chris Hinton to the NFL draft. There appears to be plenty of candidates that can help Mozzie Smith anchor that line. The Wolverines moved freshman Derek Moore all around on Saturday and tried his hand at tackle. We saw fellow freshman Mason Graham, who made a few tackles and I think made a nice stop, get the start at defensive tackle, and George Rooks got some action as well. But Rayshawn Benny was the one who stood out. Benny was a gap stopper on Saturday, and he didn't allow much of anything past him. He was consistently in the backfield and finished with 6 tackles, which is a lot for, I think, a redshirt freshman in the game. Again, very impressive. Defensive line and linebackers have not seemed to miss a beat. Junior Colson made a few plays and tackles. Overall, I was impressed. The game was mostly defensive, as the Maize team made 4 field goals. The blue team made, only 3 touchdowns, which, seeing how the offense is likely going to improve and the defense is taking a step back, it's nice to see that our defense can hold a good to great offense to plenty of field goals. And finally, every position group outside of quarterback, I think, did well. Secondary made some nice plays. They broke up passes. They followed their men. They made some nice timed hits. The linebackers got pressure. They made sure that, outside runs and even inside runs didn't really gain a lot of yardage. The defensive line had moments where they were able to pressure the QB, even though the offensive line, I would say, is better than the defensive line. It has a mismatch over them. And the run game improved from a defensive line standpoint. There were gaps that were plugged, so that was good. The offensive line, no explanation needed. Zach Zinter actually took some snaps at offensive line, and he did well, along with Victor Aluwatimi, who transferred in from Virginia. So offensive line did well. Tight ends did well. I think Eric All had one of those trick plays. It looked to be a tight end screen. Perfectly sold the trick play. You also had some nice receptions from the tight end room. Same thing with the wide receiver room. Again, Darius Clemens looks really good. Looks like he can be a breakout type player who can really help the offense. Running backs, Donovan Edwards, Blake Corum looked good. Really good. Blake Corum, again, with some of those explosive runs. A lot of them were on the outside. Also, Kalel Mullings, Leon Franklin, and especially Tavierre Dunlap looked good. Michigan having a very deep running back room. But quarterback, which is arguably one of the most, if not the most, though offensive line, I would certainly say, has a lot to say about that, important position group on the field. And Michigan, they won the Big Ten last year without an elite QB, though I would say that Cade is the best leader at quarterback Michigan has had, and Cade is probably the best decision maker that Michigan has had at quarterback, and those two things definitely help. Cade could certainly become Michigan's best quarterback in the Harbaugh era, but still, he did not look great. He did not even come close to looking elite. And part of that's the great secondary that he faces. I mean, Steve Clinkscale, you could argue, based on his time at Kentucky and his extreme turnaround of the secondary this past season at Michigan from being one of the worst in the country to one of the best, with the same players and, certainly poorer levels of talent than Michigan would normally have at the secondary. You could argue Steve Clinkscale is the best secondary coach in the nation. But Cade he still didn't look good. Alan Bowman, obviously not very impressive. Warren, for being a walk-on, suffering from leukemia, looked pretty impressive. Michigan, if they want to win a Big Ten title again this coming season, you would have to assume they are going to have great QB play, especially with an obvious drop-off on defense. So every position, and really overall the team, it was encouraging to watch, but watch for that QB battle, because I guarantee you, if Cade wins, there should be an overall level of felt concern when it comes to all the quarterbacks in that QB room. But I certainly hope that whoever starts plays great, whether it's Cade McNamara or JJ McCarthy. The battle is obviously between those two, and I feel like those two only. And that's all I have to say for this video. If you like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell as well. I plan to review a lot of other spring games for Big Ten programs. like Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State, others as well. So like this video, comment your thoughts down below, subscribe, and most importantly, hit the notification bell. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.